everybody. It's your host, Dan, coming at you with late night podcast recording session because I read this pretty recently, so I figured why not cover it? So, we're looking at Marvel Age #1. Kind of an unintentional April Fool's thing there in the cover corner box. I don't think they use that corner box for very long, and this is a pretty strong Brett Blevins. I believe it's a Brett Blevins cover. I like that head there. He manages to get a lot of mileage out of Chris Starr, which a lot of this issue is about Chris Starr. Chris Starr is, he's not a very exciting comic book character concept. Maybe it was a good comic, I never read it, but I always just remember thinking, like, because I used to buy a lot of these Marvel Age magazines when I was a kid because you'd always see them in quarter bins, like these Wizard back issues, few other things. I never found any like issues of the Comics Journal in a quarter bin when I was a kid, but they would stay pretty cheap because they were initially sold very cheap. That's why it says only 25 cents. Standard comic book would have cost a little bit more than that, but also standard comic book would have been a little bit thicker than this. This is, although, well, I don't want to say this doesn't have any ads because it kind of is nothing but ads. Yeah, I forget. This is 1983, April 19. So it says April, but what that actually means is, like, that's kind of more of a sell-by date than, like, this is the date that this came out, because there's solicitations in here for the entire month of March, meaning, in all likelihood, this was released on somewhere around March 2nd, 1983. So, yeah, so what is Marvel Age? Well, I think the first editorial goes into that a little bit. And a lot of the fun of these old Marvel Age magazines is in the house ads. I don't know if these ran in other comics of the time. I probably have some Marvel comics from April 1983 that I could look at. But yeah, so I have I think I'm missing like 15 issues out of 140 in terms of Marvel Age, so I'm thinking do this as kind of a weekly ongoing series and kind of chart the development of Marvel Comics in the 1980s and kind of, let's see, Marvel Age ends at 140, which is like a little bit after, it's probably like when the 90s Spider-Man TV show would have been in the second or third season. So like mid-90s, I think it ends right about as the speculator bubble's about to crash. So, this overlaps a little bit with Wizard, but certainly Wizard magazine does not exist in April 1983. Marvel had tried doing other fanzines before this, but they were mostly mail order. And as a result, there just aren't a ton of copies of them, and they're a lot harder to track down. Foom comes to mind. Jim Steranko did a lot of work on Foom. But, this is the first issue. This doesn't really look like every other issue Marvel Age, but a lot of the key components are there. You have a kind of cheesy column, one-page column from the editor. I think they made the text a little bit larger in later issues because one thing I noticed about this issue, going back to it, is this text is really, really tiny. So tiny. And so, since this is an ongoing series, I think a lot of what we're going to look at in this magazine is kind of where is Marvel at in April 1983? Where have they been? Where are they going? What's kind of the state of the rest of the comics industry? And this can kind of partially, I want to look at this as sort of a lead up to 1986 and the big comics explosion that happens in 86. Yeah, and so you know, they lay out what's going to be in the magazine. A lot of this, as I was reading it this afternoon, what kind of struck me was how much of this is like little inside office jokes, and that's like their sales plan to sell the comic books. And I remember being very engrossed by it as a kid, but it's an odd marketing technique, and I'll get into that more when we hit part of the issue where this happens. So this is probably my favorite part of. No, okay, this is my second favorite part of a Marvel Age issue. So this is a bunch of basically like short news items. They're usually a paragraph. This stays in the magazine, I think, until it ends. And this is pretty similar to like what's in the front of Wizard after the letters column. Because of the April 1st thing, there's a few jokes. So you get Cole the Conqueror, and he's got an arrow through his head. That's an April Fool's thing. You probably can't see it on camera, but everything on this is mirrored, and there's like a little thing from Tom DeFalco saying that they're going to put out the first ever mirror comic, and that's going to be the big gimmick, is just that they shot it mirrored so it's unreadable. But they make sure to like very clearly explain that that's an April Fool's joke at the end. There's a lot of kind of like if Wizard has the frat boy kind of, this is a little suggestive, but also this is aimed at like 12-year-olds kind of humor. Which, I mean, when I was 12, I did enjoy that. You know, I liked reading Wizard letters, columns, and stuff. This is more like kind of just like, there's a lot of kind of dad jokes in here. So this is my favorite part of a given Marvel Age magazine, and that is the Marvel Comics coming attractions. And that's why, I mean, I had a ton of these when I was a kid, but I think I sold them when I went to college. That's why I decided to put this set back together. And yeah, so what this is, this gets longer in later issues. I think this is only like 2, maybe 3 pages. Yeah, this is like 2.5 pages. And it just tells you every comic book that Marvel is releasing in the next, month. Because this came out monthly. And the later you get in the run, the longer this coming attractions page gets until I want to say it's like issue 105 or something. They just move it into its own magazine. I've been trying to find those magazines where it's just the coming attractions, like preview summaries, because A, there's like historical value in there, and B, there's it's just fun to kind of read like what did Marvel editorial, like how were they summarizing this in one sentence, and when you get to when Akira comes out, which is like I think the first time Akira shows up in the magazine is like issue 47, I want to say. And when they start soliciting those, the one sentence descriptions are baffling because they just, they haven't received the full story yet. And they started printing it. The story wasn't actually done in Japan yet. Yeah, so let's get some context and perspective. Where is Marvel right now? So this is a Bill Sienkiewicz Moon Knight. It's for Moon Knight 32, so Sienkiewicz is getting pretty close to leaving Moon Knight. Daredevil, I want to say it said that it was Daredevil 196. Yeah, 196. So we're like 1 year after Frank Miller leaves Daredevil. He hasn't come back for Born Again yet, and he doesn't come back for that until Marvel Age 36. The Thing #1 by John Byrne comes out. Byrne's still like a big deal. Dazzler 27 is out, even though the 70s are very over, but I guess she's having like a come up again. And the other neat thing about looking at these is that I get to see the solicits for, like all the comics that I never saw in the bins, or, like maybe some of these I like saw them in a bag and board, but I never had the money to buy them. And these are a little dangerous because I do start looking for these books that they're talking. Um, so I think every episode of this Marvel Age coverage, I'm going to pick the one thing from the coming attractions that I feel like a strong impulse to buy, whether or not that is a good idea. So this week it's going to be Fire and Ice Marvel Super Special, which, for those who don't know, Fire and Ice was a animated film directed by Ralph Bakshi, but with a lot of creative input from Frank Frazetta. And basically, based on the solicit, let me read some of the solicit to you. Art reproduced directly from the cells of this Ralph Bakshi, Frank Frazetta animated film, a saga of sword and sorcery as God, this print is so small. The evil King Necron's plot to cover the entire planet with ice is fought by one lone enclave of warmth, Firekeep. A Firekeep's ruler sends his greatest warriors, including the mysterious Dark Wolf and Princess Tigra, to do battle. So there's like a little paragraph about that. I can't remember if it was on the previous page or not. But they described the process of how it's printed. They said that they didn't hire an artist to adapt it. They literally just photographed the animation cells, which sounds a lot like what they were doing in Japan. And I have the first Japanese anime comic, I guess I would call it, where it's just like screenshots from a cartoon. And where did I put that? It's Star Blazers. It's like a normal comic size. We'll look at that eventually. I have a few of those, but it would just be really interesting to see like how would Marvel do that in 1983, because you look at those and it's like, oh, this is a lot easier to make than a normal comic. But production wise, everything I've read about making those, especially because they made them, 80s, you don't have a computer. Really, you can't like screenshot something and then print it in any kind of resolution. So you're just sort of like I guess if this is from the original cells, that's a little bit different. That's probably easier to do, but with the Japanese ones, they would run into all these problems because it was just like, how do I take a screenshot? And and like you look at old video game magazines and stuff, and there's always like little jail bars and stuff on the pictures. And even like early Wizard magazine, like it's pretty clear a lot of the graphics were just cut out with scissors and then pasted. Sometimes more roughly than other times, especially in Wizard. This is a much more polished magazine than Wizard, I would say. So what else is going on in Marvel this month? Marvel Team Up 131, so Marvel Team Up's going to end relatively soon. G.I. Joe's just started, and there's a bunch of stuff about G.I. Joe in a few pages. X-Men 171, so Paul Smith is still on X-Men. Marvel Tales is about like quarter of the way through doing the sequential reprints of all the Steve Ditko Spider-Mans. And actually, yeah, there's a March 1983 comic that I do own, so I can take a look at the letterbox. I think the corner box on that, I know for a fact the corner box on that doesn't look like the corner box on this. Does that mean anything? Who knows? But, let's see. And another thing of note in the solicitation for Bizarre Adventures 35, which Bizarre Adventures was one of the uh, earlier like magazine size, or not earlier, but it was a magazine size Marvel comic, kind of like Savage Sword of Conan. But it was an anthology. There's some Frank Miller stuff in there. There's some Chris Claremont stuff in there. Some of it gets a little weird, which is fun. Might look at one of those in the future. I kind of like those a little more. Epic Illustrated kind of always underwhelmed me. Epic Illustrated, in terms of the kind of heavy metal analogs in various places, just didn't do it for me. And yeah, so solicitations get cut off here. Um, there's a thing talking directly to retailers right there, and I think retailers probably got sold. What do they call it? It's not a bushel. It's a thing in book distribution where, like, when you get a catalog or something, you're the retailer is offered the opportunity to buy like 200 copies for literally like the cost of printing them. And then you can charge a little bit, because this is sort of it's a news magazine, I guess. Like, you pay for an issue of previews. And as time goes on, Marvel Age does get more substantial, and there's some more fun stuff. So here they are. They're talking about Chris Starr again. Chris Starr not really doing it for me. Like, this Rock dude he's kind of, he's okay, but this just kind of looks like somebody spray painted a Chippendales dancer. And what is that, like, Barbie pink on everything? I don't know. I'm not a big fantasy guy, so maybe this just isn't pitched to me. But I also, like, I never hear anybody talking about Chris Starr, so this, somehow I just doubt that this was that big a deal upon release or now. Brett Blevins does his best. Like, it's a neat looking page, I guess. This is, I remember even when I was younger, like, this was just such a weird fucking picture, because it looks like he's doing some kind of weird dance, and you don't know. It just looks like Chris Starr got, like, middle aged and fat, and they don't really explain who this dude is in the article. I did read this entire article. don't remember a ton about it, but they're kind of, like a lot of the articles in Marvel Age, it'll be creative team on a book that's just coming out, and they explain a lot of the stuff about the book in sometimes surprisingly minute detail, and I can see why now with how tiny the print on this book is. They had a lot of space to fill, and yeah, these pictures are kind of a mixed bag. Like those are okay dinosaurs. I'm not. I don't know. I can't draw a dinosaur like that, but I've seen better dinosaurs than that. And we get more kind of like very grainy photographs of the Marvel staff. If you like looking at stuff like that, check out the Marvel Fumetti book episode that I did. And so this is maybe the strangest part of this issue. I don't think they ever did this again. And it's called editorial notes, and I think there's like a map of them on an earlier page, but there's 7 editors working on all the Marvel books at this point, and they each get to write about, I'd say like 600 to 800 words here, and everybody had camera malfunction, but we're back. So yeah, so the Al Milgrom part is pretty interesting because he tries to give a pretty direct, concise description of what do the editors even do at Marvel in 1983. Which surprisingly, there's not much on that in the rest of these, everything from here to there. Archie Goodwin writes a little piece. Archie Goodwin, I always knew Archie Goodwin as like the Epic Comics guy, but shares some details about himself that I did not know. Apparently, he had a fairly turbulent, rotating door kind of work history before he settled at Marvel for, I think he was at Marvel for like 15 years. And he's yeah, he's running Epic Illustrated. He's doing some new things with the Marvel brand. I don't know that Epic made a ton of money. Like I see plenty of Epic stuff for sale secondhand, but I I don't know because it was all direct market, right? So they couldn't do the returns. So it could just be that like all the copies of that survived versus however many copies survived of the big newsstand titles. Yeah, there's a few other like Tom DeFalco is still, he's got this weird comedic persona about being a taskmaster that he hasn't, like that really comes to full fruition like later in the early 90s when they start having Barry Dutter do those one panel little gag comics in the Marvel announcements page in all the regular comics. And reading these, it was fairly interesting. It's neat to hear Larry Hama and Denny O'Neil talk about going to California to kind of work on figuring out the storyline and the background and lore of G.I. Joe fairly early on, like the cartoon. Before the cartoon and the stuff that Larry Hama and Denny O'Neil did for the those little inserts with the toys, like I don't know that there was lore. They're just kind of like Barbie dolls dressed like soldiers, but yeah, so they deserve a lot of credit for working on this stuff. They got a fairly strong editorial group here. Jim Shooter's at the top. Jim Shooter has written some pretty decent comics, but his prose writing and especially like his sense of humor just just it usually does not work for me. Like I get it, he wants me to like him, but it's it's like put on dad joke. Like I can see how like I think there's good things Jim Shooter did, but I can also see how he could have rubbed some people the wrong way. Here we have a very bizarre piece of Paul Smith drawing. Oh, and there's a little bootleg Mickey Mouse there for whatever reason. But Paul Smith of X Men fame drawing Conan the Barbarian impaling a dude with a sharpened pencil. And Conan the Comedian, #1. At what price laughter? That's the best part of it. But it's silly. It's neat that they include this whole like kind of, for lack of a better word, kayfabed kind of backstory of like John Buscema challenged Paul Smith to do this illustration. It's like not enough to just have a gag cartoon. Everything has to have this backstory behind it. It is kind of amazing to me how much, this is supposed to sell Marvel Comics, so it's amazing how much they're kind of pinning, like, what is the big selling point of our product to our customers? It must be our editors. I've never seen that strategy taken before. Marvel was doing pretty good in the 80s, so I don't know, it must have worked, but it's odd. This was a really interesting article, though, on the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, because it kind of explains, like, why it exists a little bit more uh, than I knew before, because I always used to see those, and I was always just kind of like, why would anyone want this? And I guess there's, like, the original pinup art, but, especially post-internet, like, why is this of interest? And they go into like this is the guidebook for licensing the characters for a long time. This is the guidebook for the editors and the artists at Marvel to kind of see like, okay, this is this person's costume right now. And it's interesting they're doing this. I'm not sure if this is like right before or right after when Jose Luis or uh, it's Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. He does all those like licensing term illustration guidebook things for DC, and I think his version appeals to me a lot more than the official handbook to the Marvel Universe. There is something really neat in this article. They have the style guide for the illustrations in the book. So this is so small, it's like kind of hard to turn when it's laid flat. Yeah, so this is hilarious. This is a handwritten note on like, don't put the characters into dramatic poses when you do the illustrations for these little written pieces. They also explain how they decided who was going to illustrate what character, which I found really interesting. And yeah, some of these, like, these are all dynamic poses. This isn't what they want. Like the note on the Kingpin is stand up straight, young man. And calm down, lady, to the Black Cat. And get up, you lazy bum, to Loki. And apparently the ideal of the handbook to the Marvel Universe style was like the John Romita Craven from I think it's Amazing Spider-Man. It's like mid 40s of Amazing Spider-Man. And that's not the character I would have chosen to highlight, but whatever. But yeah, this article is, I would say, if you're only going to read one article from this, the Handbook to the Marvel Universe one would be the one I'd read. Another great little house ad for What If. You get Conan battling Thor. And, we have an ad for Coyote, although there's not anything really in this about Coyote, but I think there's an article or two about Coyote in one of the early issues of Marvel Age. And they're doing, I don't know, I feel like this play on the National Lampoon, like buy this magazine or we'll shoot this dog cover. This is a weak composition. Like the gun, he's holding that gun down like the way that you hold, like a knife down in a kitchen so you don't hurt anybody. Like this is not a very dynamic picture. I've never read Coyote, but could be neat. I mean, it looks kind of like, yeah, it's like U.S. guys trying to do European type stuff, but one of the few epic comics I never read. Anyway, that was Marvel Age #1. I gotta edit these 2 videos together, and then... Oh, wait, you guys don't need to hear about that. What you do need to hear about is these videos are brought to you by our store in sunny, scenic Ballston Spa, New York. Silver Factory Books and Records. We got books, we got records, we got tapes, we got CDs, we got comics, we got a little bit of everything. We got live music in the spring, summer, and fall. Never been? Why not plan a trip? We're open Wednesday to Sunday, and I'll see you there.